Categories of karmas or deeds and consequent blueprints of future, chapter 4 of the book What is Destiny? The Absolute Law of Karma by Sriram Sharma Acharya. The law of karma described in the Vedic scriptures explains the science of destiny associated with continuity of life. The intrinsic impressions or sanskaras of consequences of one's mental karmas or deeds and physical actions committed with mental awareness are instantly engraved in the chitta, the unconscious mind. These sublime mental imprints or sanskaras are carried forward with one's subtle body even after death of the physical body. The sanskaras carve one's nature, intrinsic tendencies, mental development, intellectual potentials, etc., and collectively account for the fate of a person in future. The ancient Indian texts refer to three principal categories of karmas and corresponding major classes of fate. These categories of deeds are Sanchit karmas, Kriyayamana karmas, and the third one is Prarabdha karmas. While going through the following further details, we must keep in mind the Chitragupta, the inner conscience, which is impartial, pure, and wise, continuously keeps recording in the unconscious mind the sanskaras consequent to each and every good and evil deed for dispensing absolute justice at an appropriate time in future. Sanchit karmas, this term broadly refers to involuntary mental karmas unknown to the conscious mind of the individual, association with the good and bad company, and the sublime influence of the ambience around the leaf some marks on the psyche. Unless willingly and consciously accepted, sanskaras produced in this process are faint, weak in potency, and feebly reactive. The karmas which produce such weak sanskaras are known as sanchit karmas. The consequent sanskaras remain stored in some odd corner of the inner consciences, buried in a dormant state. The then there are karmas unwillingly, reluctantly performed under compulsion or in a state of helplessness. If one is compelled to carry out some activities with revulsion and these are not made into a habit, these too fall in the category of Sanchit karmas. Being extremely feeble, the sanskaras produced by the Sanchit karmas may remain in a dormant state in the psyche for thousands of years through successive births. These sanskaras generally remain inactive, but if a subtle stimulant is provided to them by deliberate, strong conscious repetition of similar deeds, these too become active like in the company of a strong, healthy horse, a lame horse too begins to trot. With good soil and adequate rains, even rotten seeds germinate. Association with identical sanskaras, it makes the weak sanskaras gain strength, whereas if the past sanskaras repeatedly come in contact with the opposite type of sanskaras, the former are completely wiped out. For example, generosity and wholehearted altruistic service of others wipe out one's own evil tendencies and vices. If for a long duration evil sanskaras face a long continuous inflow of good sanskaras, the later destroy them totally. As a matter of fact, the good as well as the bad sanchit sanskaras they bear fruit in favorable environments and are destroyed when confronted with an adverse milieu. Pilgrimages, sacraments, and satsang, that is, a company of saintly persons, etc., recommended in religious practices, are meant to wipe out the weak, evil sanskaras accumulated as sanchit karmas. The second one, Kriyayamana karmas. The physical actions fall in the category of Kriyayamana karmas. These produce almost concurrent results. For instance, consumption of drugs is followed by intoxication. Death follows consumption of poison. Human body is made up of five natural basic elements. Interaction between these natural elements produces immediate reaction. As soon as we touch fire, fingers are burned. Laws of nature govern interactions between natural elements. Defiance of these laws invites almost instant punishment by nature. Para ends. When the physical body is compelled to live on foods and habits incompatible with its psychology, there is an immediate disturbance in the natural balance of the body, which results in disease and weakening of the harmonious working of the biological system. This is nature's mechanism for rectification. Physical actions are mechanically carried out by the body without any intention or mental or emotional involvement. Unlike Sanchit and Prarabdha karmas, they produce fruits in a short time. Third one, Prarabdha karmas. Mental or bodily actions which are performed intentionally voluntarily or deliberately under strong emotional stimuli and mental involvement are termed as prarabdha karmas. Being motivated by intense emotions, such karmas subtly result in carving deep impressions and consequent powerful sanskaras. Reactions of violent acts like murder, robbery, betrayal, felony, or immoral passionate acts like adultery are very strongly felt by the inner conscience. The innate spiritual purity of the soul or the life energy is ever eager to get rid of these extraneous deleterious impurity of the chitta at the earliest opportunity. These are the karmas that lead to destroy that cannot be altered or diluted by any means. If a Sanchit karma was like a substance that has a potential to be used as explosive, a Prarabdha karma would be like a time bomb that cannot be diffused and that will certainly explode at an appropriate time and circumstance. In some life of the individual self, as found feasible in the sublime system of nature. It should be understood here that this system has to constantly take care of the individual as well as the interlinked and collective destinies of all individual selves. Para ends. It has already been mentioned that our inner conscience it keeps a constant watch over each of our karmas and determines greater or lesser punishment for each offense or reward for a good deed according to the nature of the act. For example, a mental offense, that is, provoking someone to commit a crime, would lead to destined punishment that would amount to a mental suffering and chastisement. In simple terms, this is a law of as you sow, so will you reap, keeping in mind that several lives of the individual self who sows and hence reaps may be traversed between the time of sowing and the time of harvesting in order to effectuate an appropriate result for a prarabdha karma of a person, his or her inner conscience waits for a suitable environment in the subtle world called as a sukshma loka in spiritual parlance, where the sublime system of nature evaluates the sanskaras and as per the absolute law of karma creates suitable plots, that is the blueprint of destiny for materialization of the consequent effect in the present life or in some future life of that person or individual self. Occasionally, this process is spread over a long time. For instance, for redemption of a mental sin of treachery, the sinner is required to be punished by grief. Chitragupta, that is the inner conscience, evaluates the grade of the treachery to decide the degree of sorrow required for atonement. For punishing a murderer, the divine system will associate the soul of the sinner with the soul of an individual who, according to his own karmas, can someday in some life inflict the same degree of pain and grief on the sinner which later has caused to the aggrieved person. For instance, Chitragupta may plan birth of a son or a daughter in the family of the sinner who the newborn is destined to die at a young age according to its own past karmas. The inner conscience of the killer will wait for grief producing event when the son or the daughter meets death by disease or accident. In this way, for sanskaras carried over to the next life, divine justice creates an environment for punishment corresponding to the type and gravity of the sin. It is obvious that this process is not unilateral. Divine justice makes soul of both the sinner and the sinned interact in complementary environment. This complex process at times takes several cycles of life and death. We know that in this world too it requires a long time and consideration of numerous factors before two individuals become life partners as husband and wife. The popular saying that the marriages are made in heaven indirectly refers to the compatibility of sanskaras and mutually correlated destiny of the bride and the groom. The pain of separation in a divorce too is a consequence of sinful karmas of the past life. Para ends. We may further try to understand the course of divine justice by analogy in a natural phenomena. A shrub in Africa called Venus grows to a height of about 3 meters out of its branches spread out thin thread like offshoots. These keep on growing and swaying in the air till they meet another shrub and they become mutually intertwined. Sometimes these shrubs meet each other barely after a growth of a few centimeters, whereas the others succeed in doing so after growing for a few meters. This is the way the fruits of karmas ripen for interaction over different spans of time. Para ends. The punishment for the exclusively physical sins is physical and is given without much delay. Consumption of poison results in immediate death. Mental chastisement, on the other hand, is neither instantaneous nor it is unilateral. For instance, if because of his cruel nature someone commits a murder and is caught red-handed, the state awards a death sentence. On the contrary, if the killer commits the offense secretly, the inner conscience doesn't punish him immediately. It would wait for an environment for creating in his psyche an aversion for violence by making the sinner feel the same degree of pain which was felt by his victim. That is why, at times, morally vile persons are found rejoicing and righteous ones suffering in life. The sublime enforcer or nature of divine law, it makes time in preparing an appropriate environment for dispensing the just rewards and punishment. Having understood the basic principles of science of karma, one may like to decipher other aspects of destiny. We shall look into these successively in the following chapter. To sum up, Kriya Yamana karmas are physical actions that are mechanically carried out without any intention, that is, no involvement of emotional or mental faculty, that produce fruits in a short time. While Sanchit karma was like a substance that has a potential to be used as an explosive, and Prarabdha karma would be like a time bomb that cannot be diffused and that will certainly explode at an appropriate time and circumstance. Chapter 4 ends, and thank you.